Hey everyone, welcome back to the table. I'm Scott, and today we're going to go through our How to Make a Diorama series. This is going to be a 5-part series where we teach you how to make this diorama from start to finish. We're going to tell you what materials you need, what techniques you need to learn, show you those techniques, and how to make this thing look awesome. So come join us as we walk you through how to make that happen. Hey everyone, welcome back to the table. I'm Scott, and we're going to be going through our third session of how to make a diorama. So last session, we put down our beach area, or refined our hills and our pathways. We've put down some texture on the ground. You can see some of the sand that we've used here for that. So the first thing that we want to consider is how do we want to undercoat this or prime it and get that base color down so we can build upon it with all our other layers of paint that we're planning on applying. Or the most convenient ways that most people have access to is to use some type of spray primer. This is commonly called a rattle can. Now the rattle cans are really convenient, they're really nice, but they can also be really expensive. One of the things that you need to be concerned of with using a spray can is that there are chemicals within the spray that do interact or do react to the foam. So if you spray them an unexposed foam, then it's going to actually deteriorate the foam itself and look like it's eating away and leave pocks. So given how much time we've put into this thing, we don't really want that to happen. And that's one of the reasons why we put a coat of glue over the surfaces that we're concerned about. The other method that we can use is the brush method. I recommend having a larger brush if you're going to paint this whole thing using it. So you can do the brush method. The big disadvantage to that is it does take a little bit of time. Also, sometimes you can see the brush strokes and the consistency is not completely there. So that's just going to depend on your project. If you're doing large flat surfaces, that's more of an issue. If you're doing something like this that's a little bit more textured, then it's not quite as much of an issue. Now the third option is you can use an airbrush. Airbrush gives you more control and speed built into one. The other benefit you have is that you can usually use an airbrush indoors if you have some type of fan or booth that's in it. The downside about using a diorama with an airbrush is it's usually quite large and it's bigger than the booth size that you typically have. Now, one of the other things that we want to consider is what temperature is it outside. If it's extremely humid or extremely cold or even extremely hot, then these things are going to influence how the paint adheres to your model. Let's go ahead and get to it. One of the things I want to caution you on is how close you are to the model when you're spraying it. If I have the can of spray and I'm really close to it, the paint doesn't get a chance to disperse into the air and provide a nice coat. Instead, what's going to happen is you're going to get a concentrated burst and it's going to have runs and streaks in it that just isn't going to look good. So doing burst as you're going through allows you to control and see where you're going. It also helps you conserve paint as well because now you're not overspraying a particular area. Now that we have our prime of gray over the entire model, which I think looks pretty good, got some nice coloring going on here. It's uniform. It looks less of a mess than you've seen before. And now what we want to do for our very next step is we're going to put a base color on the beach. And we're going to get to it. So while the beach is drying, we're going to work on putting our color onto our rocks and our walk area. If you take a look at nature, stones and rocks aren't just one color. They're a variation of multiple colors. And so when I'm doing these types of projects, I try not to just do one solid color on things. We're going to add some base colors to these areas. The thing that's important to explain here is while we're doing this, it's really going to look like we're ruining the project. A lot of times this is when you're going to panic. In this step in particular, you're going to panic, think that you've ruined your piece, and maybe get discouraged. Don't do that. This is where you need to trust the process and know that it's going to end up all working itself out if you follow along with the steps. Let's go ahead and start with the easiest thing, which is this path right here. So we're just going to do kind of an area like that. Now it stands out and it's very stark. That's okay. the way this is going to work is I'm just going to take and blend in all of them. Remember, we got 4 other colors, so I'm kind of keeping that in mind that I'm going to use some of these other colors. And the thing is, you don't have to be exactly perfect with it. That's kind of the nice part about this, is you can be about as messy as you want to be with it. So because we're going to be mixing these together, it really doesn't matter if we keep them separated on the palette or not, because they're all going to go together. So I'm going to stick with the family that I'm going with right now, so I'm going to do some ratkin flesh. And again, you're looking for approximations here. So if you want me, you don't have to use exactly this color. You just can go for the tone and variation. You can pick your own colors if you want. Just try to keep them in the same family. I try to stick to base colors. And so now you can see some of the variation in it. I'm just going to kind of match them around. And it doesn't always have to be there, and it doesn't always have to be touching. The big thing here is you need to determine what is going to be stone and what is going to be grass. All right, so we have our next colors on this. Now we're just going to keep going with the next one. Okay, and now we want to add a little bit more green. Okay, next we're going to do dried bark. Same process, same thing. This is a darker color, so I might not be quite so heavy-handed with it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our stone. We're going to do our variation here. Let's just work light to dark. Okay, and this is going to be on the sides of the rocks. So we're just going to hit kind of the things that are going to be the sides of the cliffs that are going to be different colors. Next, I'm going to go with Inky by Darkness. I'm just going to pour that right onto some Inky by Darkness. Again, we're just going to do on the face of the rocks. The dabs are going to be a little more random this time. That's okay. Okay. And then the last color that we're going to do here is going to be the dried bark. Now I'm not going to do a lot of that. I'm just going to do a tiny bit here. And I'm not going to clean the brush in between. I just want a little bit to be able to kind of blend the ground with this and give the rocks just a little bit of an earth tone to them. Again, right now this thing looks like an absolute disaster. It's okay, this is exactly what we need it to look like. While we let both of these colors dry, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to put down the paint on the water. Now the water itself, we're going to mix some color into the resin. However, likely what we don't want to do is mix so much color into the resin that it's not see-through anymore. So what that means is we want to have a screen on the bottom of this. We want it to look like it's a lot deeper than it really is. Now I'm going to use 2 different colors and I'm going to wet blend them together. Now you could use inks or you could use paint yourself. I like contrast paints because they tend to have more vibrancy. For this particular case, I'm going to use Pterodon Turquoise and I'm going to use Telesar Blue. And I'm simply going to use the dropper bottle and just kind of basically squirt it onto the diorama. Now the good thing about these is I can add more as I need to, and I will definitely be doing that. And I do want there to be some variation in this, so that's another reason why I'm swirling these colors. And then I'm simply going to take my brush that I've been using, and I'm just going to, my first goal is to try to get coverage for the entire thing without mixing it too much. I want the entire surface here to be colored, and being careful not to get too much onto the beach. Now, one of the things you might be worried about is the edges. Don't worry about them too much. At the end, what we're going to do is take some black paint and we're going to go around the entire edge of the diorama after we pour our resin later on in the process. Perfect. So now you can see we got some nice color variation and some depth. I did try to swirl it a little bit. I do like, so we had a little bit of mixing with the green and a little bit with the blue. I absolutely love this part. Even if we were to just pour the resin completely clear, this would have some really good look and texture to it. So at this point in time, our colors over here are getting drier. They're not completely dry, but they're drier. So the last step for this stage is going to be applying a wash into most of the diorama. Now, there's a couple different types of washes that are out there. You can get the smaller washes like this, and these are usually running you about $9 US, depending on where you're getting them from. So I'm going to show you how to build and make your own wash. I'm using this recipe from a variation of what Black Magic Craft did in one of their videos. I don't recommend using this for miniatures, but for terrain, it turns out perfect. You're going to start with a matte medium. We used that earlier actually when we did the beach, and what it is basically paint without any color in it. We're going to use about 8 ounces of this. The second thing that we're going to need is water. We're going to use about 12 ounces of water. We're going to do about a 2 to 3 mix. Next thing you're going to need is some flow aid. I use about 2 to 3 squirts from a bottle like this. I usually put a little bit in my base and layer paints, and it helps thin them down just a tiny bit. The last thing that we need for this is some ink. Ink is what's going to give it its color. So if you've done all the other pieces to it, you put them together, the ink is the thing that you can vary to make the different kinds of washes. So if I want to go something that's similar to a nun oil, I'll use a black ink. If I want to have something that's closer to maybe an Agrex Earthshade, I'd go something a little more brown with a tiny bit of green mixed in. For this particular one, I use a whole bottle. However, that's a little heavy-handed and you don't have to use that much. You can generally use about half of it for the mixture that I'm talking about. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can put it in a container where you can just take and dip like this. You can dip your brush into it and you can use it to put on whatever it is you're doing and then put a top on it and save it. Or what I like to do is actually put it in a spray bottle so I don't have to dip my brush in it. I can simply spray it and then I can wipe down with a paper towel and take off some of the stuff. And that's actually the method we're going to use today. Now, either way you go, whether you put it in a bottle or you put it in here, all you have to do to put it together is simply mix it. You're probably going to get a few bubbles and that's perfectly fine. Other thing I recommend when you're doing this is have a glove on your hand. If you are wiping it down with a paper towel, it's going to be very easy to just get ink all over your hand. It'll stain, and if you don't want stains in your hand, I recommend using a glove. I've taken the paper towel. Well, first I did the spray, and I got the general area of it. You want to make sure you have an area covered with what you're going to spray, because you will get some overspray with the spray, so you just want to be careful. So the other part of it is once you get that general area down, you want to dab it and not have large pools of wash. That's the same goes for models. If you're doing wash on a model, you don't want giant pools of wash. If you get it before it dries, it's going to be fine. But if it starts drying, then you're going to get a weird ring where the pool was, and you're going to have to blend it, and it's just a whole big old nightmare thing. Now, luckily, we're going to be dry brushing this, so we're going to be able to get away with not having to worry about a bunch of that. But I don't want large pools on this thing. So use your paper towel, dab it up. And then I took the brush and got some of the more creviced areas and made sure that they had some wash in there as well. And then again, went back with a paper towel. So next couple steps, I'm going to do the Agrex Earthshade like we talked about. And I'm just going to apply this on the walkways. We're going to use some medium, and we're going to mix it with the Agrex Earthshade. I'm going to go about 2 parts medium to 1 part Earthshade. All right, so that wraps up everything that we're planning to do with this session. Now the next session, session 4, is where the magic's going to start to happen. We're going to focus heavily on dry brushing the entire model, and we're also going to put the resin into the water area and blend and get the base for that together. So hopefully you're having fun with the project so far, and until next time when we see you at the table.